All right. So welcome everyone to this study session of the Academic Senate. I'm now officially calling to order. I can screen share, I'm going to. All right, so our Academic Senate community values are here posted. Hopefully nothing is too contentious today, so we won't need to rely on these. And as we have a number of senators, we will work on new community values. Zoom guidelines, I'll ask that basically for today, if everybody could remain on mute. And then if you'd like to contribute to the meeting, to raise your virtual hand. Because of screen sharing and stuff, I can't see everybody physically at the same time. So raise your virtual hand and then I'll call on you and you can unmute yourself. I'll ask now if there is anyone here for public comment. I doubt there is, but I'm just checking. If you would like to provide public comment, please raise your virtual hand now. Folks a second to do that. Okay, I'm seeing none. All right, so we'll get going right away on our study session topics. So yes, I'm driving the meeting today. Yes, I'm the Academic Senate president, but I really welcome conversation today. The more questions you all ask of me or other people in the meeting that know, the better for not only you, but everybody else in the room. This meeting is definitely designed, hold on. Designed to be a basically an onboarding experience for our new Senate members. That being said, it's for all senators, anybody from the campus community that wants to understand why the Senate does certain things at certain times. Maybe you want to know about the Brown Act, maybe you want to know about our agenda setup. And I am definitely not. My baby is in a babbling phase. It's super cute, but somewhat disruptive to our meeting. What was I saying? I'm the Academic Senate president. I definitely won't have all the answers today. I'm probably going to rely on Kenley a lot. Returning, Kathy's here as well. She's a very experienced senator and with our Senate. And then also there's returning senators, and some of you have gone to the leadership conference recently, so this information is probably fresher for you than it is me. So please feel free to contribute to the meeting. Please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on something. I welcome that. And let's all just have a really good meeting where we can all just converse and learn. I suspect I'll learn a thing or two today as well. So with that being said, let's get started on our first item on our agenda, which is item 4.1, which is this idea of 10+1. So where is 10+1? 10+1 is codified in something known as Title V. So there's ed code. You may hear things around campus being said like, oh, that's an ed code. We have no say over that. Ed code means law. So when somebody says that's an ed code, they're literally referencing the law that we live under as a California community college. Then there's something called Title V, which is the rules and regulations of the Board of Governors of California community colleges. So oftentimes people use those two phrases, Title V and ed code, as synonyms. They're not synonyms, but for all intents and purposes, for us as a local academic senate or us as a faculty body, they kind of are. It's like if it's in Title V or ed code, it's just like how it is and what we have to abide by. So that's what Title V is. 10+1, which is what the quote, the Academic Senate's purview is defined in Title V, which is why there's such reverence for the Academic Senate on each campus or even the statewide Academic Senate, and why that phrase is almost used in a way of saying like, don't tread on faculty purview. Like we own this, this is ours. And so what is that 10+1? It's given here. This is I took this out of Title V, like the page. Title V is clearly a large, huge document. And so here it is, academic and professional matters. So you may hear, me say in an email, or perhaps if you watch board meetings, you will hear me say or quote that the academic senate is the professional voice of the faculty body. And I'm drawing that from this Title V. I'm drawing this from 10+1. It drives me bananas that we call it 10+1, because it's literally 11 things. But the 11th thing, if you read, is, quote, other academic or professional matters which are mutually agreed upon. So the +1, the number 11, is basically just about anything that faculty and administration feels as though is important for faculty to have a say on. That being said, there's the working conditions of faculty, which is negotiated, which is a bargaining unit thing. And then there are shared governance or academic or professional matters that are the academic senate. I would argue that at SBCC for a number of years, we've blurred the work of our Senate and our union, and we don't have to get into the history of why, but I think that that's why sometimes the Senate may be treading or sticking their toe in more bargaining unit items if you've been on another campus. So here's these 10 items. Number 1 is curriculum. 2, degrees, certificate requirements. 3, grading policies. 4, educational program development. 5, standards or policies regarding student preparation and success. 6, district and college governance structures as related to faculty roles. 7, faculty roles and involvement in accreditation. We're going through that right now. 8, policies for faculty professional development activities. 9, processes for program review. And 10, processes for institutional planning, budget development. And then of course there's the +1. Okay, so now that I've said that, maybe you don't know yet, but what are your questions about 10+1, if any? Or maybe you don't have a question and you have a comment. Anything happen over the last year or 2 years or time that you've been on your campus? Do you want to know if it was the academic senate's purview or any questions?
So I have a question.
Go.
I have a question. So does that mean that these 10 items we have 100% authority on, or do we have to consult with anybody on them?
That's a really good question. So and I think Kenley knows the answer, and I think that that's why he's probing me to make my presentation even better. So the answer is, my answer is, it's complicated. I would argue that no, we don't have 100% authority on these, or maybe my language isn't accurate. We're not the final say. So we are the authority on these matters. But as you can see here in item D, consult collegially means that, like, while these are in our purview, and while we are part of the process for developing these, that there are other entities on campus and there are formal governance structures that we still go through and use. We have other constituents, meaning like other people from different bodies on our committees to help inform our decisions and be part of that process. We use the phrase shared governance a lot around campus, and Patricia Stark could speak better to this than I can, but hopefully she is enjoying her retirement, so she's not responsible for explaining it to you all. But we use the two phrases as synonyms, consult collegially and shared governance. But actually the only thing in Title V, the only thing codified in our rules, regulations, and law is consult collegially. So what does that mean? If a topic comes up on campus that the faculty body, the Senate, is consulted with, we may have an opportunity to review a procedure or policy, give feedback on. And then it would go, what I just, saying this as a glossing over, go through our governance structure. So go, from the Senate, it might be a recommendation to our superintendent president. Our curriculum committee's work goes straight to our board of trustees. We have program review that lives in a committee known as PEC, Program Evaluation Committee, which is co-chaired by myself and a dean. Right now that's Dean Corolla Smith, for example, and I can keep going. Kenley, how'd I do? Any inaccuracies in anything I said?
No inaccuracies that I heard. I would just reiterate something you did mention briefly, which is essentially all policies and all curriculum have to be approved by the Board of Trustees. They don't exist until they do. Policies that affect the whole college or the whole district. Theoretically, they could override a recommendation from the Senate, but when it comes to the 10+1 items, they typically don't. That's it.
Thanks for that, Kenley. Yeah, and anytime anybody wants to add on, please feel free to do so. Also, I'll bring up a contentious point from this last year. The board policy, the new board policy that was developed, it was originally called Fraternization with Students. We ended the name of Employee-Student Relationships, I think. Forget the final name was. But for instance, part of the political push-pull there, especially for Senate members, especially for me, was that the board offering us a time for faculty feedback on that board policy. I felt as though the faculty may have been in a much different place than the board. And so I was a little bit worried that as we developed our position on the Senate, that if it was too far away from what the board was looking for, that they would just ignore everything, which they had the right to do because they own board policies. And as Kenley's saying, we have says in administrative procedures, but we don't have the ultimate say either. And I'm just sharing that as like as a for instance, as like things that was going through my head at the time that I didn't share with the Senate. Actually, I think Robbie Fisher did at the time. But what that looked like for the Senate. And I know that that was like a fresh example for all of us to think about. Any other questions, comments, concerns about anything under 10+1?
Hey, Ray.
Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
I went to the leadership conference and they had a PowerPoint. Do you mind if I share that on the chat? It's pretty awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
I'll drop that right there. If you guys want to view it, it's starting on slide 13. Okay.
Awesome. Ben, do you have anything that you emphasized that was emphasized at the leadership summit?
No, I just thought it was awesome how they broke down what you're doing right now into slides. It was just a little bit more easier to comprehend.
Yeah,
the structure. So I'll drop that right now in the chat.
thanks for that. Yeah, and like for the work of our Senate, I would argue that it's not necessarily, how do I say this? It's not necessarily like that you all need to like, live and breathe 10+1. I would argue that it's my role as the academic Senate president in the different offices and places that I occupy to make sure that if something is owned by us, that I say, hey, that's the Senate's, that needs to go to the Senate. And I feel like I say that a lot. So as senators, it's not necessarily going to be a big deal for you to have like the 10+1 memorized. But I would also argue that it's important for all faculty to understand what 10+1 is for a variety of reasons. One, for our own empowerment. Two, because you all sit in a variety of areas on campus and committees, and then you can speak to what should be the Senate view. And then lastly, also, well, I guess that's it. Just so that you can do it, so that you know it, and so that you can employ it when needed. Okay, I feel like we're kind of in a good place with 10+1 now. Shall we move on to our next topic? Okay. All right, which is introduction to being a senator. So again, I'll say a number of you are returning senators. For instance, Tara is returning, Kathy O'Connor, Jenny, Dee Dee, and some of you are new. So returning senators, feel free. This is a great place for you to contribute to the meeting. Free to jump in and say, you know, this would be really helpful for the newer senators to know. This is what I wish I knew when I started out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so senators, you now are familiar with 10+1. So these are topics that we will be discussing throughout the year at the Senate table. Also, a big part of our fall meetings will be dedicated to position requests ranking. So we'll go through a big orientation for that in late September so that we know what we're doing in October. And then also, I'm sure you've noticed there was big budget swings through the last year. So over the last couple of months, we've been talking a lot about the budget and giving you know, our superintendent president back in that way. Now we have now we're swimming in money, almost literally, with not only the relief funds, but of course the big $20 million gift that we just got. So those 10+1 items are what we'll be discussing as a Senate throughout the next year. What do you need to know? How will you serve the faculty that you represent? One really, really great resource, and I put it on our agenda as a PDF, is the ASCCC, which is the State Academic Senate's Local Senate's Handbook. I posted this last year as well for our mini retreat session there. But it's here for your review. As you can see, it's long and in depth, so I don't even want to pretend to try and give you all of this information. There's historical stuff, it talks about Ed Code, it talks about Title V, it goes into a lot of different things. I think perhaps if the only place you look and review for your own purposes is part 4, ensuring the effectiveness of the local academic senate. That is my biggest concern. That's frankly the reason why I ran and then re-ran as academic senate president. I want to make sure that our academic senate is serving faculty in a really effective way. Not just some faculty, but most faculty. I think all is too aspirational. All right, so if you review these pages, you know, it talks about placement in the college governance structure. It talks about effective structures for conducting Senate meetings and so on and so forth. There is really great resources for keeping the faculty informed. And that's where I'm going to center my conversation for this agenda item. Because I think that is the most important role for you all as senators. And I always viewed it as my most important role as a science division senator when I served in that role. Okay, so to help guide you, I'm posting 2 sample emails. One is from Danielle Swantak. She was a division senator that represented the social sciences 2 years ago. And then one is from our own Ana Garcia, vice president, with an email from this year. So you're going to figure out your own workflow. You're going to figure out what works for your divisions. Some divisions have regular monthly meetings. Some have more frequent meetings than that. Some divisions, like the science division, only ever communicates by email, and only when, quote, something is important, meaning when the senators that represent the sciences figure that something is of importance to the science division. Why do we, or why do they do it that way? Because I'm not a science senator anymore. It's just the culture of our division. It's how it's always been. The senators found that instead of sending bi-weekly or bi-monthly emails out to the division and giving them a whole bunch of stuff and having nobody read it and nobody respond, that they would only send when things are important. Then there's the opposite of that, like I said, where some divisions are having monthly or even more frequent meetings. My preference for my division, whether it's the science or anything, if I were a senator, I would love at least monthly meetings. There's like memes. Okay, my daughter needs a banana. I know that there's, that meme about, I don't want to make anybody dizzy while I walk across my kitchen. I know there's the meme about like never have a meeting that can be an email. But I'm sure that you can all appreciate after a year of Zoom meetings and stuff that there's just something really special about being in a room and talking with other humans face to face. But again, this is going to be your design, how you communicate out to your division and the frequency that you do it. The most important part about your role as a senator and communicating with the faculty that you represent is that you are informed enough to vote on action items at the Senate. I would argue that is the minimum and what you need to be an effective senator, so that when we are voting on something and the Senate is moving something forward, that you are informed about what your colleagues say and think about certain items. Not what you think they'll think, but what they actually think and have to share back. So there's a couple of different ways that you can do this. You can either rely on your faculty to receive my announcement of the academic Senate meeting and the posting of the agenda, and expect them to reach out to you with their thoughts. I don't think that that's a best practice, but that's certainly how some people do it. I think what would be more effective is after the Senate agenda is posted, to send an email to your division highlighting what different agenda items are on there, maybe highlighting very specific ones. If there's more routine things happening, maybe don't call attention to that, but highlight specific things and then say, I want feedback on this. You can do that via email. You can get fancier and do it via a Google form. Lori Vasquez, who was a senator for a number of years, basically created a webpage to keep her faculty informed. Whatever works for you and whatever is going to work for your division would be best. And again, that might be a meeting. So prior to the meeting, you can announce, and then after the meeting, you can share out what happened at the meeting. And then also you can share out, typically we have something as a discussion item twice before it's moved to actions. Not always though. In fact, probably last year, less than not. So another way that you can do it is share out after the meeting and then say, we discussed it this week. This is what happened. We're voting on it next week. Please get me your feedback. So let me share with you now that I've said all that, the emails that I thought were really great examples of best practices of how to communicate with your division. So again, this is one from Danielle Swantak from a couple years ago. You can see it was like, you know, when we were April 9th, 2020, when we were like just starting to socially distance in the pandemic. So this is what her email looked like. She has some nice spacing here, bullet points. These were different items. She's linking out to the different forms so that people can give her feedback. She's sharing the spring teaching evaluation MOU, mentioning to people that they can reschedule their evaluation, highlighting, you know, the DE classes, the EVP report. Typically our EVPs give a lot of information during our Senate meetings, and then information, basically like for the fall, like looking forward to information is what I meant. So that's one example. Another example, and I think Anna does this really, really, really well. And if I had my druthers, you all would do this. So Anna reaches out after the meeting and, you know, she sends the agenda, she links it, she sends the recording so that people can watch the recording. And then for each of like the different items that she's highlighting, like land acknowledgement, Stanback Stroud Diversity Award, the C proposals, so on and so forth, each of those links is a link to the YouTube recording. If you didn't know, when you go to YouTube, you can like get the specific timestamp and like share that with people. And so that's what Anna does, just kind of like, here's the highlights from the meeting. You don't have to sit through all of the like formal stuff. You can just cut right to the chase and get to the discussion so that people can be informed. I really like that. I think that it was like a really good idea for her to do that. So that's all I have to say about that. Tara, Jenny, Dee Dee, Ellen, Kathy, do you guys want to share any insights for how you guys communicate with your division? Anything aspirational, anything that works or doesn't work? Jenny?
I'll just say one thing I had to get used to personally was, you know, Ray will send out the agenda with like 72 hours notice. And so I had to get better at like reading that right away. So I had enough time to reach out to my faculty and give them enough time to respond to important issues. So, you know, if you wait a day or two and then you try to solicit feedback, there's not enough time. And then people are like, wait, I didn't get to give you my feedback. So that's just something to maybe pay attention to or like prime yourself for. And then one thing I'll say to you, Ray, as a new senator, when I first got on, and I still feel like I'm totally new, sometimes you would say, you'd send out the agenda and say to senators like, hey, a really important thing that you might need feedback on is blank, you know? And it helped me a lot because as a new senator, I was like, how do I sift through all this and decide what I should get feedback on? So that was super helpful for me.
And I will definitely continue that practice for sure. Like when there is something, yeah. Good, thanks for that, Jenny. Reinforces that I need to keep doing that. Ellen and then Tara.
So the ESD division isn't using the website Lori created anymore, but now we have a Google Drive, and so we do meet monthly, and we time that so we're meeting in a week that's both after and a week after and a week before the next Senate meeting. And the agenda for that meeting has a lot of links to various documents. And then that we fill that in, and that serves as our minutes for those meetings going forward. So everyone in the division has access to that. And I will say, this is something that came up at the beginning of last year. So I was a new senator last year and came to this orientation meeting. And I think we must have had some discussion about which divisions included part-time faculty in their communication, even though Anna is the part-time faculty senator. In the past, we had not included part-time faculty in the ESD meetings or Senate emails, and we decided to do that. So we just created 2 different Google groups, one for part-time faculty and one for full-time, in case there's ever a need to email those groups separately. But we just, as a practice, we include our part-time faculty, and a lot of them have come to division meetings. That I don't know if that will happen still when we go back face to face and they don't happen to be on campus that day or whatever, but I think that's been really great for our division. And then as far as getting feedback, we've, depending on the issue and the person providing the feedback, it might happen over email or something like that. But on some of the things that have really needed more detail and nuance, we've had Google Docs that we can all contribute to, so that then once we're in the Senate meeting, Jennifer Hamilton, who's also ESD senator, and I have, all of that, like the biggest concerns right in front of us while we're in the meeting. So I think that all of those things work well for us.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ellen. You shared a lot of good things. Two follow-up comments for what Ellen just shared. I'm glad to hear you moved away from sharing via website. It's a possibility. I would argue that the best practice really would be emails for people. I think going to some website somewhere that like you're spending a lot of time on to make like clear and easy to navigate would be time not necessarily well spent. People barely read their emails, let alone like go to this like other website that they're not going to, like expecting to go to. So unless you're really comfortable with like the people in your division, or like are literally training them to like go there, I think it's going to be really hard for keeping your constituents informed that way. I think emails are really, really good, like putting it in their inbox. Hey, read this. Hey, get back to me. That's number one. Number two, Ellen, I'm so glad that you mentioned that about inviting in part-time faculty. So I talked about that a little bit last year. In the science division, I'll share when senators send out, this is something I think we do really well. When senators send out emails about Senate happenings, we include all of our part-timers and the staff that works in the sciences. We have a number of lab techs that work in the sciences that are directly affected by some pedagogical decisions that the Senate may be making. And as such, it's been really helpful. And even though the Senate doesn't represent staff, it's just, I always think of Senate emails, whether they're division emails or campus-wide Senate emails, it's just another vehicle to get information out, right? I'm not saying that you should include staff in your, in your division voting or however you do it. Like the sciences doesn't even really vote, right? It's just like putting information out so that we're all on the same page, so that we all have equal footing. We also have 2 email lists. We have basically the whole division, which is where almost all of our Senate emails go, almost always. And then we do have a full-time faculty email list, because there are, not often, but there are sometimes where it's like, there's a topic that is just affecting full-time faculty. And so, okay, we have that and can use that email list, but almost always we're using the more inclusive one. So just think about that. If it's not the norm for your division to include part-timers, maybe this is a good opportunity to change that. If nothing else, it's making your part-time faculty feel more engaged, more informed, more part of our process, included, right? All the things that we talk about all the time. The other thing I want to highlight in this conversation is, who do you represent? Who is your faculty? There's different ways of thinking about this, but here's how I think about it. Ana Garcia is the part-time senator for credit faculty. Tricia Matone is the part-time senator for non-credit faculty. They represent part-time credit or non-credit interests. Whereas you as the division senator represents your division interests. So if like you're Jenny and you represent English, you represent English. So from that viewpoint, like all encompassing, you are bringing English issues forward. So perhaps one of the part-time faculty in English has something that needs to be shared that applies to all of English. It would make sense for that part-time faculty member to discuss it amongst their division with the English division senator. If they have a part-time consideration that is unique to being a part-time faculty member, then it would make more sense to go to Ana Garcia for her to represent that. Does that make sense? So our part-timers are kind of, you know, like can go either place. Or if it is your division norm not to include your part-timers, then it's probably not normative for them to come to you. In the sciences, that would totally be normal and welcome. Okay, sorry, Tara and then Dee Dee.
Yeah, thanks everybody. I mean, I'm just gonna probably echo what Ellen and Jenny have already been mentioning. I will say that I represent the social sciences, and we have always included part-timers and staff on all of our emails. And we, you know, listed a lot of great feedback from them. So it's always important to include, you know, especially your part-time instructional faculty. It is really then important for each of you to keep track of all of the various instructors in your division. And that can be a little complicated sometimes with part-timers. For the social sciences, we have a lot of part-timers who aren't really that much of part-timers. They've been with the college for like 15 years. So it's kind of easy to keep track of them. But I would say it's important to make sure if you have an email list that you're inheriting from a previous senator, make sure it's accurate, make sure it's up to date. I know that was one of the first things I did. There were some folks on there that you know, hadn't been with the college in more than a decade, and we were still sending them out email reminders all the time. So it's a good idea to update that. And I will say that for the social sciences, the one lesson that I've learned in sending out all of my emails to my division is that, you know, Ruth and I do a great job of summarizing what has happened at Senate. We do a good job of including links to various AP or presentations or the YouTube videos. But you might find, like we find, that your division doesn't really read those as carefully as they should. So if there is something that's really pressing and you really need their feedback, it needs to be a standalone email. You know, instead of it being kind of buried and I'm having to excavate for that information and put on there like, this is time sensitive. We really need this feedback immediately so that we're well informed by the time Senate is meeting on Wednesday. So that's important. And then I will just say, like what Ellen was mentioning, you know, having something like a Google Drive is really important where you can place all of this documents. It also just becomes really useful for you because you might find like you have to send out the same PDF many times and you're like, oh gosh, why didn't I save that? Where did I put it? So just, you know, having a Google Drive that everybody has access to, that's great. I will just lastly note that we tried to do it on a Canvas page once. We do have a Canvas shell, and we thought this would be a great place for our division to have like discussions using the discussion board. Yeah, no friends. It didn't work out. We still have it, but it didn't really work out. So I would say emails, a Google Drive, that's your best bet.
I will not name names, but I just had that exact conversation with people. So yeah, I won't give out too many details, but I'm like, nobody is going to go to this Canvas. They're like, it's great. It has all these features. I'm like, I'm aware. Nobody's going to it. Anyways, sorry. So you're cracking me up, Tara, for that. Thank you. And Dee Dee?
Hi. Not to like make this prolonged, but we do the same thing that Ellen and Tara had mentioned with regard to email, and it's been highly effective for the Health and Human Services Division. What we have done in addition to sending emails and setting up Google Drives is we've created a shell in Canvas where instructors can log on to get additional resources and ask questions and things like that. And that's been not too effective, but we have to probably remind them that it's there and to check it periodically. But for the most part, the emails have been highly effective for our division.
Right on. Thanks, Edie. Yeah. Tara reminded me email, and Dee Dee just reminded me to email. So Tara, you inherited the list. I inherited a list as well. And it was inaccurate. So 2 suggestions there. 1, create a Google group, because then the Google group has an email that you just send the email to the Google group and then it goes to everybody. And it's easy, really easy to add and remove people from the Google group. So if you aren't familiar with that and want me to send out like a tutorial on how to do that, I can do that. The other thing is, and I'll send this out several times to senators. We have Kenley says, and new users can see the historical email posts. That's a good point. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, so as you're added to it, you can see the previous threads. The other point I want to make about, what was it? I just lost it. Ellen, you have something to add. I'm sure it will come to me after you talk.
Maybe this is where you were going. At the beginning of the academic year, there's the document we have to fill out with everyone's committee assignments, and that also includes who are the current part-time faculty. And so in our division, because there's 2 of us senators, we just divided up the departments and reached out to the department chairs or directors of each of those departments to find out who was actually currently employed as part-time faculty, and use that as the basis for that Google group. Actually, I think we asked them to confirm full-time faculty as well.
That is exactly where I was going with that, and I totally lost it. So let me share my screen with you all again. So if you weren't already aware, and maybe you weren't, and that's okay, everyone on campus has access to the Academic Senate shared Google Drive. Under the Academic shared Google Drive, there is the Academic Senate shared folder. I know it's redundant. In there, if you ever want to go through this, you can, is all of these different folders with like the different years, agendas and minutes and different things. Resolutions, constitution, bylaws, etc. I'm highlighting this to say, find the 2021-2022 folder. And in there are subfolders of meeting dates. We already had one, our emergency meeting from a couple of weeks ago. And then I'm adding stuff for our July meeting in there, so you can find things in there. But what Ellen is mentioning, and this is where I was going and then lost my train of thought, is this Academic Senate Leadership Constituencies and More document. This is a really helpful document for you as a senator in a number of ways. And perhaps you've laid eyes on this before, perhaps your senator shared it with you before you were a senator, or perhaps you've just seen it in other ways if you weren't a senator. So this is like, I think Kim Mondo was the first one that created this. It might've been Priscilla Mora. This is like a master document of our faculty body, and we try and make it as accurate as possible. So the first half of the document, and I'll share this out, especially with new senators, well, especially with everybody, but new senators, you'll need to work with this for the first time in the fall. The first half of the document is where we have basically all of the different governance bodies on campus, and then who serves on them. So for instance, our Academic Senate is the first body, and then notice how I've updated it with all of you and what division you represent and things like that. If there is a vacancy, there's a blank line provided. And then there's Senate steering. So if you're ever curious who's on Senate steering, the information's there. And then after that, immediately comes all of our different academic Senate committees. So not all governance committees are Senate committees, but the Senate committees the Senate owns, right? And then these typically are Senate committees. Most of them are ones where we have what's called divisional representation, where somebody, at least somebody from each division, serves on that committee to represent their division on that committee. So we have academic policies. It also gives information about like where and when it meets typically, the CFR, the CAC, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the first half of the document is all of our governance groups, okay? The second half is what Ellen is kind of speaking to, which is basically our constituency. And this is the part that she's talking about updating, and the part that I will be asking for you all to update and update and update again, because I feel like it changes all the time. So let's go down to, I'll use, the English division's relatively easy because it's one department, one division. So I'll use Jenny's division as the example. Okay, so each division has a heading. It identifies the dean, and then it identifies the senator or senators. Some divisions have more than one. And then it gives the departments. Now, English division is the department, so that's pretty easy. And then it lists full-time faculty. And then this is the hard part because it can change every semester, the adjunct or part-time faculty. So as Ellen was saying, in her division, what she does, because there's multiple departments, and in fact, Ellen's division is immediately preceding English. She'll email the department chair, or some of these have directors, of each of the different departments that make up that division. So DSPS, she'd email Jana, EOPS, now we have a new person, that's why it's blank, I haven't updated it yet, so I need to copy that over. The FRC, we don't have a faculty, we have a lot of changeover, I think we already knew this. Okay, Laura is retiring, of course, so this will be updated. But anyway, she's emailing the director or the department chair for each one and confirming the full-time faculty, and then also any potential part-time faculty, and then editing this document so that it's accurate. The other thing that you're responsible for as a senator, and the other way this document might be really useful for you, I'll go down to again, a less complicated division. Let's use my own for an example. The other way is, or what you are responsible for as a senator, is assigning or delegating, or whatever word you want to use, divisional representation to the academic Senate committees or campus-wide committees, depending. So what you'll do is and I'll use the science division now as the example. Here's biological sciences. Here's all the full-time faculty. What you'll need to do is update their campus service. So the name of the faculty member is given. Peter is serving on FPSS, that's a Senate subcommittee, and he's also the advisor for the pre-med club. Jen Betancourt, she was on Academic Senate, so now Jess and or Robbie need to update this. Jen Betancourt needs to either be assigned to a committee, or she needs to participate in campus service in another way, so on and so forth throughout your whole division. So as Ellen said, and I'll reemphasize what she did, and this is also how I did it, I would just copy and paste it directly from the document, email it to the chair, say, hey, is this accurate? If it's not accurate, please let me know, who retired or who resigned or who's no longer with us, and or confirm their committee or campus service. Does that make sense? And the more organized that document is, I would argue the better that we can function as a shared governance group, because then we can make sure we have divisional representation on our committees, and that we have faculty in place on all of the campus-wide committees. All right, cool. Any other questions, comments, or concerns about your responsibility as a senator before we move on? Now's your chance. Anything in the chat? Nope. Okay, I think we can move on. Our next item of business, 4.3. Senate agendas, the what's, whys, and whens of the agenda. Okay, so let me find a generic agenda for us to look at and consider. Should have figured this out ahead of time. I'm sorry I didn't. Presentations. Yeah, this is a decent one. Okay. All right. So just as demonstrative purposes, I grabbed our March 31st, 2021 Academic Senate meeting agenda. So it's on board docs. Okay. So board docs is really, really awesome in a lot of ways. It's searchable, so you can go back. It's searchable in ways that Google Docs aren't. Also allows for public posting so that we're compliant with the Brown Act, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But some things are clunky and awkward too. And I would argue some of the things are a little bit awkward for procedures of our meeting. So first of all, I'm saying this because item number 1 is always going to be an informational item. It's just who's currently on the Academic Senate. So we have officers on the top, myself, there is a vice president, Ana Garcia, and then the past president, it was formerly Patricia Stark, and it's now Kenley Neufeld. Then we have our senators in alphabetical order by last name, I think. No, alphabetical order by division, okay? And then we have our ex officio members. So ex officio means by position, by office. And so currently in our constitution, our EVP sits on the Academic Senate, and so they are an ex officio member. We always have an ASG representative at the Senate, and then we have a faculty association liaison. Sometimes the faculty association liaison is also a sitting senator. However, it's been my preference as Academic Senate president to have sitting senators represent their division only and have a separate, distinct person that represents the FA at the table. And then of course, Cristina Garcia Otero is our administrative assistant, and our meetings would not function without her. So that's typically all of the people, quote, at the table for a Senate meeting. The ex officio members are non-voting. The Senate president is also non-voting except for a tie, but we'll get into that when we get into parliamentary procedure. That being said, we also have a number of guests that typically give presentations or are invited to the table for a specific discussion item. Other than that, everyone else is, quote, the public. So we always start a meeting with a call to order. A new norm has been the creation of these community values. I always try to speak to one of them at the beginning of the meeting. Since we're on Zoom, we have these ridiculous Zoom guidelines. They're not ridiculous, they're helpful, but it certainly stifles conversation in a lot of ways. Then usually one of the first things that we do is approve the agenda. Once in a while, we have to have a timed item. That's usually a presentation from a guest. We usually try and time the presentation so that our guests can know when to show up and give their presentation. Also, because I'm sure you can appreciate, faculty tend to wax on about things, right? And so it's helpful when we have to get through something, whether it's a presentation or a specific vote, to have timed items. We usually do the approval of the agenda by what's called acclamation. And again, that's a Robert's Rules of Order thing that Kenley can talk about a little bit later. But basically that means the agenda we're going to go through as posted unless otherwise stated at this time. I'll announce it and it will be, posted on the agenda. And so that's the, quote, approval of the agenda. It's just kind of this formality thing. And so that's when we're talking about items to be taken out of order, item 2.5. Okay, public comment. So we'll talk about this more when we talk about the Brown Act, but then we always go straight into public comment. So we are a quote Brown Act committee, which means the public has the opportunity, the legal right to come and address us about the law says anything that's under our purview, but in practice that literally means they can come to us and speak to us about anything, quite literally. So at the beginning of every meeting, I will, reference like now's the time to give public comment like I did at today's meeting. We do have the option, or not option, we do have the right to limit public comment, which is why our public comments are timed. So right now we are operating with a 3-minute time limit for public comments. But basically the public does have the right to come and basically recite poetry for 3 minutes at us. They can show up and say that I am a terrible human being. In fact, that happens and has happened. And I'm not joking. They can come and speak to an agenda item or something that we're voting on or something that is happening on the college. So they have the right to do that. I'll share with you a feeling I have. Whenever people start their public comment by saying, thank you so much for allowing me to give this public comment, it drives me nuts because no one is letting you come and give public comment. It is your right to give a public comment. So I know it's like overly like polite and whatnot, and clearly you want whatever board you're speaking to hear you. So it's probably a good thing to do. But I think it's not helpful in understanding that you as a citizen in our local community, or not even, because we're on Zoom now, have the right to give a 3-minute statement to the board. So I'll get my, not the board, I just mean like the body. Okay, so I'll get off my bandwagon about that. So that's public comment. Just so you know, we can talk about this more during the Brown Act. I'll just say it briefly now. Public comment can happen at the beginning of the meeting at that time, or a person from the public can request to give their public comment immediately before the item is discussed. And so they declare that at the beginning. I want to talk to the body before item, whatever, 5.3, 6.7. And then later on in the meeting, they can give the public comment. Last fall, we had a resolution to include more voices at the Senate table. Some people felt very strongly that it's kind of moving towards an anti-racism way of doing things to open our Senate meetings up to basically anyone that had wanted to contribute to the discussion. So let's say a compromise between different, points of view of like, do we open it up, anybody and everybody can contribute to the discussion, or do we keep it more to senators? How do we do that? We did have this resolution where, and it's usually linked to the agenda, where Santa Barbara City College campus community members, so staff, faculty, students, administrators, can come late, leave early, and can request public comment throughout the meeting. We didn't want to open that up to the general public. We wanted to keep the general public comments in a very like neat, tidy place, because sometimes, unfortunately, public comments from the general public can be pretty disruptive. And if you've ever watched a Santa Barbara City College board meeting, I'm sure you can appreciate that that's not an understatement. All right, so anybody have questions on anything I've said so far? You good with public comment? Okay. All right, then we typically, oh, Jess, go for it.
So I thought I read somewhere, I just don't remember, or maybe I didn't even read it. But there is a, I guess, like you said, you can recite poetry and there essentially could be an unlimited amount of public comments, but there is there is something in place to prevent like a filibuster, right? So that we can actually get our work done for that day. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that would be decided upon by us. So the board handles this by saying that any topic has a limit of 20 minutes.
Okay.
And like, that's their rule. So that ties into that idea that we have to allow public comment, but we can restrict the length, whether it be the length of the individual comment or how long we're going to take public comments for.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's true. It can turn into a filibuster type scenario.
It's just have to be very cautious with that, Jess, because you also don't want to infringe on people's right to speak. So as a member of the public with our local city council, for instance, I've always been opposed to any significant restrictions on my ability to speak to them. So it really is up to the body, but also at the same time, we are guided by some rules on this, and it's not Robert's rules, it's not our bylaws, it's not our constitution, it's actually state law, which governs the public comment aspect. It actually falls under the Brown Act stuff. So, but Ray is correct. We can limit also.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and I've literally been sued for public comment and restriction of First Amendment rights, and I'm not interested in ever being sued for that ever again. And neither is my husband. So yeah, so we'll be really careful about that, and hopefully it's a non-issue. I mean, the problem with this stuff is it's never an issue until it is. And I would argue the same thing about you guys being senators. It's like, you know, your faculty won't engage with you, won't engage with you, won't engage with you. And then all of a sudden something is the most important thing. And like, you weren't even expecting it to be that way, right? And now everybody has an opinion on something. So it can be interesting. Okay. All right. So then item 4.1, approval of the meeting minutes. And this is where I'll rely on you senators especially. So Christina Garcia is the one that will develop our minutes for us as the administrative assistant to the Academic Senate. And then she provides them and we post them. And these are really, really, really important for posterity. So it's your responsibility to read them for accuracy. And then when we get to this agenda item, request a change to them. And I'll give you a for instance of like a time that this turned out to be really important and we didn't think about it at the time. And I know Kenley remembers this. A number of years ago when I was a newer senator, we had lengthy discussions. At that time, we only had one summer session and we were going to move to 2 summer sessions. And we voted on it as an academic senate. And some people remembered that conversation to be, we were going to vote on it and do it for the 1 summer session and then reassess. And then other people understood the conversation that when we were moving to 2 summer sessions, that we would do it for at least for 2 years. And so it was literally like two years later when we had a second summer of 2 summer sessions where people said, wait a minute, that's not what we voted on. And everybody went back to the minutes. And unfortunately, it wasn't as clear as it could be in the minutes for some people. And so it did not resolve this issue for us. And so this is just one example of why minutes are so important. So whether you abstain from a vote or you vote no, or you weren't there for a vote, or you were there for a vote, or you were there for a discussion and something, you know, you're reading something and it's not quite how you remember it, please bring that to the meeting. Please mention it so that when we approve the minutes for posterity forevermore, they're as accurate as they can be. So typically the way I've been doing approval of the minutes is through acclamation. I'll say the minutes have been posted. You've all had an opportunity to review them. Does anybody have any edits or changes at this time? If not, we will accept them as posted. Kenley?
Yeah, so technically under Robert's rules, we don't need to vote on minutes ever. And so typically, since we mail them out in advance, you're supposed to read them in advance. If there's the president is supposed to ask if there are any corrections. If there are no corrections offered by the body, then the president can say the minutes are adopted and it's done. So I know we haven't been practicing that way, but it might be worth, we do follow Robert's rules, and that is under Robert's rules for minutes. Also, anyone can ask that the minutes be read during the meeting too, which could be fun.
You mean instantaneously, right, Kenley?
The reading of the minutes?
Do you mean the previous posted minutes, or do you mean like, can you go back and read what we were discussing? Which case?
No, like if the minutes are on the agenda and we're on that agenda item, typically the president would say, are there any corrections to the minutes? If nobody says anything, the president says the minutes are adopted.
Mhm.
End of story. But in the course of that conversation, that one question, anyone could say, make a request to have the minutes read. And so then you would have to open up the 2:24:21 minutes and read them out loud. I might do that just for some fun,
And I might threaten bodily harm. Okay, we're all on the same page. Okay. All right. Thanks for that, Kenley. It's always good to know these details. Okay, then typically we have a section on communications. I don't always have a written report. You want to be near me? Sure. You want to say goodbye? The meeting's not ending. It's going to be another hour, 45 minutes.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, go in the living room. No. Okay. Communications. Typically, I'll have a written report. I'll sometimes still give an oral report, and other times I'll just give an oral report. Senate liaison reports. I know it doesn't seem like the most exciting thing to go through our Senate liaison reports, but as senators, to be truly informed, this is, and to be able to communicate with your faculty body, this is one of the best places to learn what's happening across different committees and across the campus. So our Senate liaisons, those are the people that are on Senate steering, except for the past president and vice president. And so they go out to the different committees and interface with them and provide these reports. Oftentimes I will ask, do liaisons want to provide oral reports? Almost always Ruth, who is our CPC and CAC liaison, will say, yes, I have a few things, but you should still read the report. Or she'll always almost say, you should read the report. I don't want to add anything else, but you should read the report. And so she's like a really good person to help, nudge you all to remember to read the reports. So as you can see, they're usually very detailed and give a lot of descriptions about all of the different stuff that's happening around the different committees. So to quote Ruth Morales, you should definitely read the liaison reports. The executive vice president, we will have an interim very soon. I expect an announcement for that sometime, but in the interim we have nobody, which we don't have any meetings in the meantime anyways, but typically it just depends on the executive vice president. Pamela often did not give a report, not even an oral one. Once in a while, when things were happening around COVID, we would request a lengthy written report so that you all had access to information, or a brief oral report from her as well, or the next person. Item 5.4 is something that we as a Senate adopted. This is a new practice. This isn't something that had been done before. Coming into the academic Senate presidency in a pretty tumultuous time, let's say, people feeling on campus like they didn't have a voice or a way to participate in shared governance if they weren't already at one of the tables, we developed this new norm. And so it's always on our agendas until we as a Senate decide that we don't like them, it's not working. So it will always be listed as requests to agendize items at future meetings. And so what this is an opportunity for people to email me, a senator, or anyone on steering, and they can do it anonymously or ask to remain anonymous, where they can request to agendize something for the Senate to consider. So for instance, you know, Sarah Boggs, on behalf of the Faculty Mentoring Project, wanted some kind of response to COVID. And so she sent me a letter, and so we put it in here. Art Olguin, Dr. Olguin has sent a few requests here. He wanted a conflict of interest policy to be developed, and so on and so forth. So you can write, you know, an email. It does not need to be formal, or you can talk to someone in person. I've taken these orally, and then they go into this request for the Senate to agendize items. Then when we get to this item on a particular agenda, we say, okay, there was this request. Do we want to agendize this at a further meeting? Yes or no? And then the Senate decides. So for instance, the Senate decided that we wanted to agendize Dr. Olguin's request for a conflict of interest policy development. I don't think we also created a resolution for the COVID response. So it's just another way for people to get, you know, have a say in meetings. And this was born out of a previous president not wanting to agendize something, and then like a faculty letter was made and there was a lot of pushback and things like that. So that is to try and avoid situations like that, so that I, as Senate president or steering, can't unilaterally say what does and what does not go on the Senate's agenda. Of course, it's a steering's sole purpose to create agendas. And so it is their purview to say what goes on agendas and what doesn't. But this is also an opportunity for the Senate body as a whole to vote. Okay, then we have consent items. So the way consent items work, and here's an agenda where we have 3, sometimes we have none. We vote on what's called the consent agenda as a whole. So if there is something on the consent agenda that we need to discuss, then it needs to be pulled from the consent agenda, and it would go at the end of the agenda. And we might not get to it. It might be kicked to a later agenda. So this is a place where you will need to review it ahead of time. If you have questions, comments, or concerns about a consent item, you need to make a request. Not only you need to make a request, you should make a request. You should feel empowered to make a request to remove one of these items for further discussion by the Senate. So, you know, here on this agenda for consideration, we have the PNR committee program review ranking, the ITC committee ranking, and then also a proposal for reorganization of the business division. So these were items that were either created by a Senate subcommittee body or had the approval of the affected division or the affected body. And so it was very cut and dry to have these on the consent agenda as consent items, to approve them as 3 items together, no discussion, just Senate approval and move on. But again, if it needs to be discussed more, you have the right to remove it, and then it goes at the bottom of our agenda. Information items are literally that, an opportunity to share information at the Senate level. And then we get into our discussion items. So like today, these are items that we're literally discussing. Oftentimes we discuss items twice and then they're moved to action for a formal vote. Yeah, this is like where we spend the bulk of our meeting. And then sometimes we have presentations. Now, presentations are literally that, it's a presentation, but they're also discussion items. So they do have their own separate category. We could call them discussion items and just make them timed items. We had nothing under action items for this meeting, and then adjournment, and then you can always find future scheduled meetings of the Academic Senate published on our agendas. The other place you can find that is on our Academic Senate website through sbcc.edu. Okay, that was a crash course into what our agendas look like. Any questions, comments, concerns? Comments from previous senators? Things to look out for, things you wish you knew? Jenny?
I don't know if you mentioned this, maybe even at the beginning of this meeting, just about like how and when senators like participate in using the raising hand, and like, I don't know if you want to say anything about the WAIT acronym, or just like, you know, what it's like to try to engage as a new senator. Like I always felt unsure, like when can I talk? Like when should I not talk? Is this something I talk about? I don't know if that would be useful.
Yeah, so first of all, always stop me to ask questions. Like never feel bashful about like, wait, what are we doing? Or wait, what, can I do this? Either I or Kenley as parliamentarian may say like, oh, we can't discuss this, or you can only ask clarifying questions. So we might say that, but that's not in like an effort to like stifle the conversation or to correct you. Like, don't feel anxious if we have to do that. It's just like the rules and regulations and norms of our meeting. But you should always feel okay to ask questions. Jenny, you talked about two things. Yeah, so I try to always explain that you should be raising your virtual hand to contribute to meeting. That stuff is in our Zoom meeting guidelines, and it's posted every single meeting. And then the WAIT acronym, which Jenny is mentioning, is under our community value. And for those of you that haven't gone through Crossroads training, you might not be familiar with it. The WAIT acronym is why am I talking? Why aren't I talking? And so you can think about that two different ways, right? Like if a person is speaking too much and like taking up too much space, or why aren't I speaking? Like, why am I not contributing? Why am I remaining quiet? Maybe I have a whole bunch of thoughts about this, but I'm not saying it out loud because I don't feel comfortable to do that, or I don't feel empowered or something like that. So it's just kind of this check-in with yourself of like how you are engaging in the meeting. I will always try and do my best. I tend to like over explain what we're doing in the meeting, but I do that for two reasons. One, so that senators know when we're doing something, when, where, and why, but also for the public, because we have a lot of people that aren't part of the Academic Senate or don't understand the norms, and so might not understand why we're doing something. And it's just this inclusive step that I'm trying to do to make sure that everybody knows what we're doing. I also try not to use too many acronyms, although at SBCC we love our acronyms and it seems like everything is an acronym. So it's always good to stop me or whomever and say, wait, what does that mean? Or what are we doing? Or why are we doing this? And you should feel welcome to do that. Any other comments, questions, or concerns before we move on? I see Anna just joined us. Hey, Anna.
Hi, everyone.
All right.
Marianne, I'm going to add one thing because
Go for it.
I came on Senate as just like a total novice, you know. I haven't even been at the college for that long. So I was really incredibly intimidated by the acronym thing. That drove me crazy. But also it kind of just took me a while to realize too that the board docs with the agenda, that's where all like the attachments, the files are. And I know that's super obvious now, but at the beginning, it was just yet another thing I had to get comfortable with. And then I would say too, that often what is framing our discussions are existing academic policies. And so then I would read the academic policies in my head felt like it was going to literally explode. And so what Ray is mentioning there about not being shy about saying, I have a clarifying question because there's all this legalese and I don't get it. What is, just tell me what it means and how does it fit with our current discussion? So just don't be shy, because I probably will be there going, I don't know what this is either. Because I too I've only served on Senate for a year and it's been a weird year, right? All through Zoom. So I got your back. If you have that question, I do too.
Yeah, and I appreciate it as well, because as academic Senate president, and you'll learn this as a senator too, I am more in the know than I realize. And so, whether it's an acronym or reference to a committee or reference to like a new initiative, just in terms of like getting through stuff, I might not explain it as well as I could or as well as I need to. And then that help. And then you all can say, hey, wait, what? And then as Tara's saying, like, she might have that question too. And then you just might be the one to pause and ask about it. So it's always like, you should feel, even if I seem like I'm rushing through, or even if I seem like this isn't a good point for me to ask, I'm telling you, like, it is a good point. You should ask. So feel ready to do that if you feel the need to. Okay. And yeah, as a senator, you're going to learn way more about the college than you ever knew was possible. Okay. Now I'm going to kick it over to Kenley to share some insights on parliamentary procedures. Kenley?
Yeah, you can stop sharing and we can just look at each other. All right. So thank you. I'm going to try and condense the salient points of this 700-page Robert's Rules of Order book for you. There's a lot there, of course. But essentially, the most important rules that govern our operation are the Constitution of the Academic Senate, which can be found on the Academic Senate website. Make sure that you go and read it. And the Academic Senate bylaws, which are also on the Academic Senate website. You could probably read both documents in about 20 minutes, so it's not too complex information to work with. So definitely take a look at those. But I think maybe I'll spend 10 or 15 minutes, I hope, on this, just to help guide some of our work. And the third thing is the Robert's Rules of Order, which our Constitution says is our governing, our guide for meeting operation. So the purpose is to keep an orderly, functioning body of 22 people or 21 people to meet in a way that makes sense, hopefully, and also supports the president and gets the work of the Senate done. And something just to follow what was just said a few minutes ago, in order to speak at any time, there are a few exceptions, which I'll mention. You must first be acknowledged by the president. So that's, in Zoom, it's raising the hand. When you're in person, it's also raising your hand. So you need to be acknowledged by the president before you can speak. And there's a few times when you can interrupt the work to ask a question without getting acknowledged. You can call a member to order. So if somebody's misbehaving and you need to say something, you can call a member to order. You can ask for a point of order, like, what the hell is going on here? You can make a parliamentary inquiry. So you can say, hey, what's the procedure for making this decision? Or where are we in this decision? What are we voting on next? And you can also request information. So all of those things support what Ray was just saying. Basically, you can interrupt for those 4 things, but otherwise you should wait until you're recognized by the president. Second thing is, for any time that we're voting on something, the president must state the motion. It's also known as a question. So state the question, state the motion. prior to debate. So somebody makes a motion, I move that we give $200 to the student government. Somebody can second, and at that point, the president would restate that a motion has been made to give $200 to the student senate, etc. If she delays at all in restating that, any member of the body can interrupt and ask for a change to the motion, okay? Before the president says a motion has been made. Once the motion has been stated by the president, it is now belonging to the assembly. That means it belongs to the Senate. Before she states it, the motion still belongs to the person who made the motion. So you can ask them a change to the motion before it's stated. You can ask the senator to withdraw the motion before it's stated. But once it's been stated by the president, it is now a motion on the table for the body to debate and vote upon. Okay? And that includes amendments and so forth. So there's two things that we have in our meetings. One is discussion and one is action. And we went over that in the Senate agenda. So discussion items typically are simply that, they're discussion. Our Senate bylaws and Constitution require us to hold a discussion in one meeting and then hold a action in a subsequent meeting. They do not occur in the same meeting typically. There are some exceptions, and I'll cover that in a few minutes. Well, actually, I'm going to cover it right now. Look, I made some notes, and that's exactly what I was going to talk about. So we did this at our last meeting. So where time is a crucial factor, the Senate may vote to suspend the rules and vote to take action on an issue immediately. So there has to be a motion to suspend the rules and then a motion to take it to action. Okay. So, and those both require a 2/3 vote of the senators. Okay. So even if it is a discussion item, if it's something that's more urgent that we want to take action on right away, you can make a motion after you've been recognized by the president to suspend the rules and take it to action. And then in the Constitution, you'll see that any action the Senate takes, it is anything that we vote upon, it does not become effective for 10 days, 10 working days, it says. But on urgency matters, and you have a 2/3 vote, you can make it considered immediate, effective immediately, which is what we did at our last Senate meeting, as you recall. So now you know that we made that urgency motion. At our next meeting, the Senate can reconsider that motion, as long as there's at least two members, a first and a second, or a petition of 20% of the faculty. Total faculty, tenure faculty, to reconsider that urgency matter. So say we voted on that urgency matter, which we did, and 20% of the faculty say, oh, that was horrible, we hate that, and they bring in signatures to Ray and they say, we want you to rescind this, then we have to reconsider it. Under Robert's rules, all voting is a voice vote on action items. I know we've been doing it a little bit differently in the Zoom time. But technically, all actions are voice vote. Any member can request a show of hands or a roll call on any vote. So even if there is a voice vote, any of you can say, I make a motion that we have a show of hands or a roll call, and that's a non-debatable request.
Can I, one thing?
Yep.
Governor Newsom has, well, you're talking about Robert's rules, but Newsom says right now, because of the Brown Act, we must do roll call voting. So that's why we do the roll call voting right while we're on Zoom.
Yeah, I figured it was a Zoom thing, because typically we don't do a roll call in the room.
Yep.
And as Ray mentioned earlier, she only votes, and this was interesting, this was in the Constitution, it said to break or make a tie. So you can vote to make it a tie or break it. Yeah. So anyway, lots of power there. And in terms of acclamation, basically the president can declare something and it becomes effectively a unanimous consent. So like with the minutes, she could see that nobody has corrections, therefore she can declare that the minutes are adopted. without a vote being needed. Of course, anybody can ask for a vote. So in terms of motions, it's also known as a question. As I said, the main motion, it's usually called the main motion. And I already mentioned to you that, once it's been made and the question has been stated by the chair, then we'll begin debate. And typically the person who made the motion gets to speak first. I don't know if we've been practicing that or not, but usually if you make a motion, you get to speak first. Other motions can happen on the main motion. So there could be amendments. There could be a motion to postpone it. There could be a motion to refer it to committee. There could be a motion to lay it on the table, which means basically we're not going to deal with this right now. And we can make a motion to recess. And there is a certain order to all of these when they are made. Basically, when these motions occur, and they're debatable, not all motions are debatable, the debate will be on the motion, not on the main motion. So say there's a main motion and someone says, I move to refer this to PNR. So at that point, and it's seconded, at that point, you would debate whether or not to move it to PNR, not the actual original motion. So that's kind of what the parliamentarian helps to keep that flow and order of things, to make sure you're talking about the right things at the right time. So probably the main thing to a motion might be an amendment. So like, say there's a motion and it's, a paragraph of words. You can make a motion that says, I move to amend by adding these words. I move to amend by inserting this word before that word. I move to strike something. All of these amendments must be seconded, and all of these amendments are debatable. We vote on those before we go back to the main motion, which would then, if the amendments were approved, would be a new text, obviously. So that's basically how we work with the motions. Certain things are not debatable, as I mentioned before. A motion to adjourn is not debatable. A division of a question is not debatable. So this would be something like, I move to divide a resolution so that it's considered separately. So like maybe there's two parts, and you as a senator say, this would be easier to take in two parts. You can move to say, let's vote on these two different, as two separate motions. And that is a non-debatable motion once it's made and seconded. Parliamentary inquiry, which I already mentioned. There's no second required for that. A request for information is no second required. If during the course of motion discussion or pending vote, any of you can ask whether we still have a quorum before we vote, and at that point, that's non-debatable, and then the parliamentarian would verify that we still have a quorum. A quorum for the Senate is 51% of members. Something that to suspend the rules is non-debatable. Moving something to action is non-debatable. And this last one, you can make a motion to limit or extend limits of debate. So you could say like, I make a motion that we only allow speakers to speak for 5 minutes each. So that would be a non-debatable motion, but you would still need, the body would need to vote on that at that point, whether or not that would be the case. Or you could say a motion to limit debate for 20 minutes on this agenda item. And again, it's non-debatable. You just vote right away to say whether we will limit the debate on this topic. Just a couple more things. Yep, I got 1 more minute. Motions that require 2/3, suspending the rules, moving something to action when it's not noticed, a motion to limit or extend limits. So what I just said about setting limits on debate, that does require 2/3 adoption. Making a change to an approved agenda. So say you approve the agenda at the beginning, but then you want to change something in the agenda, you can do that, but it requires 2/3 vote. A motion to extend time on a pending question or a motion, and I know this happened at the last Senate meeting of the semester, that requires 2/3 vote to extend time. So just keep that in mind. Yeah, that's about it. I put these things in in a Word document, and I will put it in the chat. There's also a PowerPoint in the agenda that we had today. But I didn't create that PowerPoint, so I can't actually speak to the content fully. But I'm sure it's great because I know one of the persons who made it. So that's
Yeah, it was just a reference item I threw up there from the ASCCC.
yeah, and I'm sure it's great. And you may want to look at it, you may not. So anyway, are there questions, thoughts, concerns? And I will put this document. Oh, maybe I can't put it in the chat.
Jenny?
Did you talk about serial meetings?
That's Brown Act. I'll get to that on the
Oh,
next.
sorry, I'm sorry.
It's okay, and actually
not
there
trying
is
to be
stuff
difficult.
there is stuff about that in Robert's rules as well. But since we don't do serial meetings very often, I think yeah, we'll let Ray cover that one. I guess I have to put this document in Google Drive in order to share it in the chat, so I will figure out how to do that.
I think one statement I want to make about Robert's rules is like, truth be told, I keep track of the ones that like I need to run the meeting, and then I probably rely too heavily on the parliamentarian to keep track of the motions and stuff, because yeah, like in the moment I'm trying to run the Zoom meeting or the meeting in general, and it's like I can't remember what needs 2/3 and you know, quorum and this, that, and the other. So that's why we have the role of the parliamentarian.
Yeah.
And so if a lot of that was, you know, coming at you really fast, like just know that it is Kenley's job at the meeting to stop us and say, no, we need this motion, or, you know, this needs to happen. That's literally his job, and he's going to stay on top of it for us.
Yeah, probably the most two important ones are to be recognized by Ray before speaking, and two, if you have a parliamentary inquiry, you can interrupt at any point and ask, you know, the question of whatever it is. So if you remember those two things, I think we'll be fine.
It's also empowering to know the Robert's Rules of Order, I would argue, right? Because if you are invested in getting something to happen, then you want to be a leader in that, and not get caught up and be told no, or be told no, it needs to look like this, right? So like knowing how to play the game allows you to play the game, kind of idea. Okay, so perhaps we'll move on to our last agenda item in the last, 15 or so minutes, which is the Brown Act. You can have that. Bring it over, please. The Brown Act. So I gave a whole bunch of background information and attached it to the agenda. Probably the most important ones are the Brown Act Faculty Leadership Institute slides that are listed there, and then also the governor's orders on the update of Brown Act compliance for us in this weird COVID socially distancing time. One that I rely on a lot actually is, I think it's this one, the local agency. I think this is it. No, that's an article. There's one in here somewhere. I'm forgetting which one it is that I go to. Oh, it's the open public. It's the open public PDF. That's the one it is. So this is like the League of California Cities produced this, I think a couple of years, 2018. This is the one I rely on a bunch. No, 2016. Because I think it like gives very specific examples, and it also is in kind of plain language, so I can follow it. So this is going to be your crash course on the Brown Act. So the Brown Act is literally California state law and this is how it reads: the people of the state do not yield their sovereignty to the agencies which serve them. The people in delegating authority do not give their public servants the right to decide what is good for the people to know and what is not good for the people is not good for them to know. The people insist on remaining informed so that they may retain control over the instruments they have created. hold on one second. Franny, your feet reach, baby. So basically says that the elected officials have to keep people informed of what's going on, and things can't happen privately and they can't happen in closed door meetings. I'm actually, while the Brown Act can sometimes be really cumbersome or annoying and very clunky, and sometimes impedes our ability to work quickly. I think it is overwhelmingly a powerful and important thing. And I actually am a huge fan of the Brown Act for the reason of everything has to be done out in the open. And we are a Brown Act committee, the Academic Senate, and so we have to abide by this law. Jenny mentioned that I send, for instance, the Senate's agenda 72 hours in advance. Why do I do that? The Brown Act says that a Brown Act body must post publicly the agenda at least 72 hours in advance of the meeting. I'd love to send it before that. I'd love to send it a week before, but oftentimes I'm waiting last minute for people to finish the reports or people to get me a document. And so I am almost always butting up against the deadline just to allow people to work. But I can't add things to the agenda after it's posted. I can't add documents on it after it goes out. Things can be removed from the agenda, like, or we don't have to get to everything on the agenda. But a big part of the Brown Act for our purposes is that we can't discuss things that weren't agendized. We can't randomly start talking about, you know, something that happened on campus even that day in a formal way and take action on it because the public wasn't informed that we were going to discuss it. And the public has the right to know what we're discussing, be present for it. They have the right to address us via public comment, as I already discussed, and so on and so forth. So the Senate is a Brown Act committee. Our subcommittees no longer are. They were at one point because of how our bylaws were set, and we found that to be really restrictive, and we weren't complying with the Brown Act in certain very rigid ways. And so we just changed our bylaws so that we're compliant with the Brown Act. So our subcommittees aren't, our steering committee isn't. You know, the Board of Trustees is a Brown Act committee. College Planning Council is not a Brown Act committee. So if you want to take a deep dive or have a clear understanding of why some governance committees are Brown Acts and why some aren't, you can take some time and go through this PowerPoint, or you can go into like the minutes histories or the history of different minutes from different committees. But big take home message here is that the Senate is a Brown Act committee, and so our work must be done out in the public. So here's certain things that I want to share with you all about mostly don'ts of being a senator. Okay, and a couple of things that frankly got us in trouble this year. Not trouble, but trouble. Okay, so meetings, yeah. There's a lot of information here. Serial meetings, somebody mentioned serial meetings. All right, serial meetings are strictly prohibited by Brown Act committees. What is a serial meeting? A serial meeting, it can happen a number of ways. Probably for us, it would happen one of two ways. One, we all get together after the meeting and have a closed door meeting. We cannot do that. We cannot meet as senators and work on Senate business outside of a formal posted meeting. We just cannot. That's one of those like clunky things, right? Like it would be super helpful to like not have to agendize stuff and not invite the whole campus and not have public comment. I get all of that, and we legally cannot do that. The other way a serial meeting can happen is via email. we cannot conduct business via electronic communications. So for instance, if I send you all an informational email, okay, and I say, senators, we're doing this, that, and the other, you cannot reply all and engage in conversation about it, nor can you forward it to another senator and be like, hey, what do you think about this? How are you thinking about this? What questions do you have? Where are you at with this? Do you think your division is going to vote for this or not? That is what's called is considered a serial meeting. Another thing is if a senator sends a message, whether a formal letter or an email to the Senate body, that message must then be what's called sunshined, meaning it must be printed on an agenda given to the public. The law specifically says, like, the Senate can't receive anything separate or at a different time than the public. So how do you correct that? How do I correct that as the Senate president? I then have to, it's literally called a correction, cure and correction. I have to post it on the Senate agenda. That literally happened to the Senate twice this year. We received emails from senators or formal letters from senators to the Senate body, and then they had to be posted publicly. And that has to do with this idea of like our business, even our communications are the public's business. So a serial meeting would be one where we have emails to the group and then a conclusion or a correction is made in that content. So if we're receiving it amongst ourselves and the public isn't, that can't be, so it has to be sunshined. That's not the same as me emailing you all and saying, hey, here's the agenda items. This one in particular, you might want to talk to your division senators about. That's just an informational email. You can also ask clarifying questions via email, like, hey, Rand, you said Wednesday, June 19th, did you mean Thursday? That's okay. Like a truly clarifying question or a typo question can be asked, but don't go into, hey, why are we talking about this? Or what does this mean? Or where's the documents for this? Or I guess you could ask, where's documents for this? But like, on such and such line of the document, it says this. I don't think it should say that. So we can't conduct our business via electronic means. The other thing, there's also this idea of a daisy chain. So this could, this is another type of serial meeting. Like, you all should not be texting each other about Senate business. It is literally illegal. So like, if, Ellen asks me something and then Ellen then texts Tara and then Tara texts Kenley and then Kenley, right? That's this idea of a daisy chain. So again, whether it's 2 or 10 of us or 19 of us, we have to do the Senate's business out in public. Daisy chains, hub and spoke, email. Yeah, I covered all of those. Okay, so meetings that are exempt from this rule. Okay, individual contacts, like Ellen and I can have lunch together, but we shouldn't be discussing Senate business, right? Because that would be a serial meeting, even though it's just the 2 of us. Social or ceremonial occasions, if you find yourself at a retirement party at SBCC, or the play at SBCC, the art gallery, and we all just happen to end up there as our own individual people, that's okay too. Conferences, same thing, and meetings of another legislative body. We can show up to the Board of Trustees and have it not be a quote academic Senate meeting. But other instances, you need to be careful. I know I'm running out of time, so there was one more thing that I wanted to mention, emergency meetings. I talked about public comments. Maybe you guys have questions about that. closed sessions. Typically, closed sessions are only about legal or personnel matters. The Senate typically doesn't have legal matters to consider, nor personnel matters. So the Senate generally can't have closed session meetings. And then also I feel like there was one more thing I wanted to mention to you. Closed session, maybe not. Yeah, when in doubt, ask. I think that's it. All I have for you all about that. I will say that this doesn't have to do with the Brown Act per se, but I just found out from SBCC's lawyers that I cannot censor the YouTube video or our meeting recording at all. So if you guys remember at our special meeting, we had somebody come and give public comment. They provided misinformation about COVID-19 vaccine, and YouTube flagged it and took it down. That's different than me flagging it and taking it down. So like if they have issues with this, like they can take it up with YouTube, that's fine. But if I edit it, that's me infringing upon, that's me literally serving as this like government body infringing upon their First Amendment rights. So I just received today the information from SBCC's lawyers that I am not allowed to edit that video, and we can't get it posted on YouTube. So, you know, I could put it someplace else, maybe like Venmo or something, or not Venmo, Vimeo, what's it called? Vimeo. Yeah.
Or Google Drive, you could do it there too.
Or Google Drive, but I don't have the captionings right. Anyways, but for instance, like there are legal matters that or legal considerations that the Senate does deal with, and the Brown Act is certainly one of them. Okay, so we're now at 5 o'clock. I'll ask if there's any remaining questions before we get out of here today.
Hey Ray, do we know if we're meeting in person or not in the fall? Because if we're not, and some folks want to do it remotely, the Brown Act is super wacky. Super wacky.
Yeah. So Tara is mentioning, so this is why we didn't do it this way before. So if we were to meet in person and prior to COVID, and then somebody was like, hey, I can't be there, can I telecommute in? What you literally have to do is make wherever you are available to the public. So for instance, you cannot telecommute in to our meetings from your living room unless you are willing to allow somebody from the public to go there. So 72 hours in advance, we would have to designate your living room a location of the meeting, an additional location of the meeting. And then if the public wanted to come and give public comment from your living room, you would have to allow that. And you would also have to physically post the agenda on your door. So when Tara says it gets like super wacky, she means it gets super wacky. The governor actually has suspended it. That's part of the executive order that I have up there. So we don't have to do that. In the fall, as it stands now, if we were to meet in person, and we might, if there's, you know, a critical mass on campus, and then we can have the Zoom capability for those that can't make it. We would not have to do that crazy wackiness. We could proceed with a hybrid model until the governor lifts his executive orders. So hopefully that won't happen anytime soon, just to make, you know, people convenient for people. Anna?
He is lifting them on September 30th. We just learned that at the Leadership Institute. And apparently there are some legislative bills floating around trying to make changes to the Brown Act to allow telecommuting in a more updated way, because obviously at the time when it was written, We were not at the place we are now technologically, but just FYI, September 30th.
So there you go.
Yeah, and I directly asked the academic senate president, the ASCCC president, if she thought that legislation would be revised for things like Zoom, and she said, "Don't hold your breath." So I hope she's wrong because it's just so out of date.
Well, I didn't want to say no to Anna, but that was what I was thinking as she was saying that. I'm like, oh yeah, right, sure.
Yeah,
That's gonna-
already knew that, already knew that.
The Brown Act, Kenley's saying the Brown Act was passed in 1953. Yeah, so. Okay, coolness. Well, that was cool. Any other comments, questions, or concerns before we get out of here today? You want to say bye? Okay, everyone. Franny's saying bye. She's closing the meeting officially.
Bye.
Thanks for everybody's time and energy today. See you again soon.
Thank you.